Hi, I'm Mark from Founders&Tips, and today we are talking with Steli Efti, CEO at Elasticsales.com, a sales as a service company that also developed their own sales software, Close.io. Hi, Steli.
Hey, how's it going?
Fine. Could you please explain your personal profile and how you decide to launch Elastic and later Close.io?
Yeah, I'd love to. My background has been in entrepreneurship from a very early age. I dropped out of high school when I was 17, 18 years old to start my
Mm-hmm.
first business back in Europe. And then after a couple of businesses, about 7 to 8 years ago now, I decided to move to the US, move to Silicon Valley to start a technology company. Um, the reason why we started Elastic Sales now almost 3 years ago was that the myself and my co-founders had all started ventures in the past, and we always knew of the massive challenge that new companies and startups have once they've actually developed a minimal viable product to actually go out there and sell it successfully, especially if you're in B2B, if you're selling to business customers versus to end consumers. So, one afternoon we had a discussion about like, wouldn't it be awesome if there was something like AWS for sales, like Amazon Cloud, but for sales? So when you have a startup and you develop a product or a service, you could just plug into a platform and you'd have thousands of salespeople that you can like scale up or down with that go out and sell your solution to the enterprise and to other businesses. And we started brainstorming around that idea, and it really was just something that we wanted to have for ourselves. So eventually, one of us asked, well, if we think this is such a great idea and is so much needed for entrepreneurs, why aren't we just building it ourselves? And eventually, we ran out of excuses, so we decided to give it a go and start it. Um, and similarly, that's kind of very similar to how we developed the software. Now, once we actually had a little bit of success with Elasticseals with some clients, we knew that there is demand and people
Mm-hmm.
wanted this solution. We had to think about how to scale this, how to be able to build an infrastructure to allow our salespeople to succeed every day and to do sales for all these different companies. So from the get-go, we thought, well, let's build technology. Let's build a software that's going to allow our salespeople to both be happier than other salespeople and be a lot more productive and effective, and as a result, more successful. So for a very long time, we were developing Close.io as an internal secret sauce that
Mm-hmm.
allowed our salespeople to be more successful than others. And eventually, the demand from the outside world grew so large that we decided to release the software and allow other companies to benefit from it.
Okay, thanks. Sales are probably the most difficult part of the startup environment. Why is so difficult to sell? Because we don't have the tool, because we don't have the knowledge, the attitude. Where do you think it's the main problems on be able to sell when we are running a startup?
That's a great question. Obviously, there's many reasons, and it depends individually on the startup DNA and founding team,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some teams have sales expertise from the get-go, but many don't. I think that overall, sales is really challenging for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I think that many startups today are very focused on the product and technology and design, and everything we read is about like building great products and technology and all that, which is all the sexy parts. It's the beautiful part about a startup. But actually, generating sales is kind of the messy, dirty reality part of running a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that people just don't find it as sexy. That's definitely one part. The other part is that I think sales definitely has a bad rep. I think most people, when you talk about sales around the world, think about kind of some, you know, the kind of slimy, lying, self-interested, egotistical person that never stops talking and will do anything to get your money. And we all don't want to associate with that, so we all try to stay away from it. So there's kind of these reasons, but I think also at its more of its core, I think that sales and entrepreneurship is very, very closely related in the fact that in sales, you have to deal with rejection every single day. If you try to close 10 deals, you will never succeed at all 10.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely, you will fail more than you succeed. And it's difficult for us to keep going as we're getting rejected. Most people try to design their life around avoiding rejection and avoiding mistakes and avoiding
Mhm.
failure. And if you're in sales, you have to deal with people telling you no, telling you they're not interested every single day, and still get up and keep the same kind of pace and energy. And it's very similar to an entrepreneur where you have to deal with a lot of rejection, still keep going. But I think it's ultimately what makes a lot of people kind of stay away from it or being afraid. And ultimately, when founders go out and they try to sell and they get the early rejection, a lot of times they retrieve and they try to find other ways to grow their business. And they're like, we'll do it virally and we'll come up with PR. Try to find ways that are not going to put them in a position to get rejected face to face. And I think that although that's a big challenge, that's also the opportunity, because if you're willing to put yourself out there every day like that, you're most likely going to get to places that other people don't, and that a lot of times can be a recipe for big success.
Uh-huh. And and do you think that now it's more difficult to sell than it was before, in terms that it's more competitive environment, people are more ready to objections, or just the opposite? We have better tools, we have more knowledge of this environment. I don't know, compared to 10 years or 20 years, change a lot, or what's your
Yeah,
opinion?
yeah, that's a great question. I think that it evens out over time, right? So I think there's certain things that are more challenging today. I think that customers and consumers are a lot more empowered than they've ever been. It's really easy for people to find information about you, about your business anywhere. It's very fairly easy to find a lot of information about your market in general and just become a little tiny expert in something before you
Mhm.
decide to buy something. So I think that in that way, it's a lot harder to because you're not in control of that information as people might have been in sales 20, 30, 40 years ago. Um, but at the same time, I think it's also easier because you have a lot more technology at your disposal and your market is a lot bigger. So today, I don't have to go door to door to knock, and I'm not limited by my territory and my environment. I can talk to you virtually as I can with prospects and customers around the world. I can utilize technology that's asynchronous, like email, and contact millions of people, thousands of people. So there's a lot of like technology that allows me to learn more about you as a prospect, to contact you and stay in touch with you and follow up with you, and kind of widen my reach and impact. So I think that all in all, it evens out. At the end of the day, sales is all about being able to build rapport with somebody, understand what their needs are,
Mhm.
and see what your solution or product is relates to those needs and can solve those needs in an effective way. And being able to go out there and ask for the opportunity to discover that, as many times as possible. And I think that those core truths to sell will probably always stay the same.
Mhm. Continue with the startups environment. My own experience, and also see others, CRMs are not usually a good solution for startups. I don't know what you experience, and why all these technologies, at least the ones I try, are not getting a good fit with the startups environment.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I totally agree with you, and that's why we developed our own solution because we really didn't like what was out there. I think that traditionally you have to actually consider the history of CRMs. When companies first started thinking about CRMs, they were actually nothing else than an address book for a business. And they wanted to have all the contact information, address information up to date in there. I think over time, businesses started thinking, how can we keep track of more and more information and data about our customers? And they decided, well, who would be the best person to keep that address book up to date? Well, our salespeople are talking to our customers every day. Let's have them do all that work. And once they started doing that, they started thinking, well, let's keep track of what our salespeople are doing all day long so we can have reports about the future and forecast over the next quarters. So CRM software was developed very much with a top-down approach where it was built for the top management and it was basically forced down the throat of the individual end user. Hence why, if you look at CRM software, it's not really made to make a salesperson's job easier or make them sell more. It's just a database that forces them to keep track of data and do manual data entry work all day long. And I think that also, if you consider who built CRM software, it was actually engineers. And engineers are as far removed from salespeople in their working, their thinking as
Mhm.
possible. So there was not a lot of empathy in the way that software was developed. Um, I think today we're seeing a big trend of a reverse in that of like thinking about enterprise and business software and building it from a bottom-up approach, building it with the end user in mind, building it with kind of an end consumer-like user interface and design, because our enterprise users are using Skype and Facebook and Twitter and all these kind of end consumer apps all day long. So when they go into work, they want something that's as equally well designed, as equally enjoyable to use. So I think that we really are probably at the forefront on this when it comes to salespeople. We were one of the first companies that had a really strong engineering team that worked really closely with salespeople all day long, sat next to each other, really
Mm-hmm.
empathized. And we built the closeout for our own needs as a startup. So that hence why I think so many startups around the world are discovering us and wanting to buy the software. But if you ask like why do most CRM systems are not really great software for startups, I think it has to do with the history of how they were developed originally.
Okay. Then the approach of Close.io, it's very focused on a tool to help the salespeople, and then include these reporting functionalities that also is need. Any other special approach that you develop at
Yeah,
Close.io?
Yeah, so a couple of important things. I think number one, Closeout was really focused on inside sales because that's how most SaaS and startup businesses do sales. We're not really great software for people that go knocking door to door, for field salespeople and outside salespeople. We're really a tool that's focused on people that sell, while sitting, in their office environment, through selling typically through email, through calls, through online demos.
Mm-hmm.
So we built Closeout as a sales communication tool. So we have full email integration. So any email that you send or receive from customers or prospects automatically tracked in Close.io. And we also have calling baked right into the product. So when you're on a customer page or a prospect page, you see their phone number, you can click a button and you call that customer right through the app. You don't have to go and pick up your phone or any other
Mm-hmm.
software tool. So you can basically communicate in the software all day long and it automatically tracks everything that's going on. I think that's kind of one of the core differentiators is that we have communication at the core of the application. Um, the other thing is that obviously it's really beautifully designed. It's a joy to use all day long. And then last but not least, because we have a lot more data and the data that we have is a lot more accurate because we know every email that you've sent to customers and received, every call you made, how long those calls take and all that, without you having to do any manual data work, because we have all this data that's been produced by software versus by humans,
Mm-hmm.
we're able to give you a search engine that's really powerful and really give salespeople access to big data to help them close more deals. So I'll give you an example, something that you can do in Closeout that you can't do in any
Mm-hmm.
other CRM out there in the world. In Closeout today, you could go in and you could search and say, show me all prospects where I have an active opportunity, that's more than 70% likely to close. And I want to see the ones, especially the ones that I had at least two calls with, phone calls with. And the
Mm-hmm.
calls, let's say, should last for at least more than 10 minutes. So I know that I had a real conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see all the leads that have at least three calls with 10 minutes that have an active opportunity. And where the last thing that happened was that I sent them an email, they opened that email, but they never replied to me. And let's say that that has to have been longer than 14 days ago, right? That way I know those are really hot prospects. I talked to them multiple times, and I know that I sent them an email probably asking them for an action item, and they saw the email, but they've never replied to me, and I haven't followed up in 14 days. And Closer is able to give you an answer to that question immediately and tell you, here's the three opportunities you should go after and follow up with. So we've built a pretty powerful search engine based on all the data that we're getting.
Uh-huh. Then all this functionality helps a lot when you want to scale your sales. What's your recommendations when you want to scale your sales process? Any key elements or any where you should focus?
So you really should divide sales just like you do with product, your pre-product market fit and post-product market fit. And the kind of activities before and after are dramatically different. And with
Mm-hmm.
sales, what I call is first you're in sales exploration mode and then you're in sales execution mode. Sales execution is all about scaling, hiring more and more people to execute on a given strategy and track their performance and make sure that you make small incremental performance improvements and you either keep or improve the core KPIs as you scale your organization. But before reaching kind of sales market fit, you're in sales exploration mode. And in sales exploration mode, it's all about finding a predictable and repeatable sales model that really works. So there, what you want to figure out is you want to figure out where are our leads coming from,
Mm-hmm.
and are those sources repeatable? Are those sources scalable? Right? If I close 10 deals in one day, but all those deals are kind of introductions from my investors,
Mm-hmm.
that's great that I closed 10 deals. It's a really good thing, but it's not necessarily a scalable source of leads. I can't go out and hire 100 salespeople because I can't keep giving them those kind of leads to go after. And I can't also benchmark them on that performance, right? So you want to look at your lead sources, and if those lead sources are high quality as well as if they scale, like
Mm-hmm.
how many salespeople could we actually keep busy with these kind of quality and quantity of leads? You want to look at leads. You want to look at your conversion funnel and like how many of those leads actually qualify to buy our product. How many of the qualified leads actually can we close? And then you want to look at what's the time to close. Does it take us a month on average, a year, 10 years? And then you want to look at what is a deal worth to us. Like when we close a deal on average, how much revenue does that mean? Really, does that translate to for our business? And once you have those core things established in your funnel, you want to do the math and see how many salespeople can we hire? Like how well does this model scale? And what are the economics of it, right? So if it takes me a year to close a deal, it better be a deal worth a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
right? If it takes me a year to close and the revenue I'm making is $10, then you know you're not ready to scale. So don't go and try to find more salespeople. Most salespeople are not going to solve your problem, right?
Yeah.
So finding a way to either increase your revenue or decrease the time to close or go after specific different market is going to be what's required. So the early days, it's all about exploring and figuring out the basics of your sales model, and really always starts with leads. People always start to look for like their conversion rate on closing. You need to look at your lead sources because they are the lifeblood of sales. And if you get that funnel kind of right, it doesn't have to be 100%. It just needs to be 70% correct. Then you can actually bring in some senior sales talent and leadership and
Mm-hmm.
some kind of director of sales or VP of sales. And these people are really good at taking something that's kind of working and tweaking it and scaling it and making it really grow. So that's kind of the way that the framework in which I would think if I was a startup thinking about sales.
Okay, right. Then the team in each of these situations, it's critical. What kind of teams you need for each type of startups, depending on your marketing product fit, and how to hire the right people for these steps of the company.
Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent question. It was just actually on a sales officer our call with a fellow founder, and we had exactly this discussion. So I think that in the different stages that I would think about is the very first step is founders need to sell themselves, right? You can't just like you cannot typically successfully hire just engineers and designers for them to build your product, and you as a founder are not involved at all with the product.
Right.
You need to be involved in the sales process, get your hands dirty, no matter if you have sales experience or not, because the feedback that you're getting from customers, the things they're telling you and the way they're telling you these things is going to be really critical to making like core decisions for your business. It's going to help you make pricing decisions. It's going to help you figure out product decisions, design decisions. So as a founder, it's critical in the early days that you're involved in every single deal. You talk to customers, you hear what they say, you really figure out the kind of the way to make this successful, and you're as close to your customers as possible. So at the beginning, I would advise the founders to sell. Don't hire people from the get-go,
Mm-hmm.
sell yourself. Even if you do it poorly, you'll learn a lot. Once you've got some initial success, some proof that there's some market out there and somebody is interested in buying, then as a next step, what I would advise is for one founder at least to still keep being heavily involved in sales and kind of leading the sales effort for a little while longer,
Mm-hmm.
but hiring 2 to 3 junior sales resources to help. And a lot of times people want to jump that step and immediately hire some senior salespeople or some sales leaders and executives, but that's typically too big of a jump because in those early days, if you closed a few early deals, you still don't have a model that kind of works. And a lot of senior salespeople are good at coming into an environment where there's already something there, and improving that and scaling that. A lot of sales managers and sales leaders are not great at developing the core sales process in the beginning and really working closely in that messy startup environment, giving feedback to the product team, giving feedback to the founders, and really kind of adapting and changing as they're exploring what works. That's not really what they're great at. The great is going out there and killing it and closing it once there's a process that works. So once you've done a little bit of sales yourself, bring in some junior resources, some people that have the hustle, the kind of drive to go out there and sell, but that's still going to work under your leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you have a little bit more firepower. You have a little bit of competition, which is friendly competition is healthy in sales. It's kind of a competitive sport, right? You need other people to kind of pump you up and push you
Mm-hmm.
forward. And once you get you explore and try all kinds of different models, once you find a few models that kind of work, they don't quite work yet perfectly, but they kind of work, then you bring in some senior management, some senior talent to take that small team that you built and the basic process that you built and improve it and refine it and
Right.
scale it and grow it, right? So those are kind of the three stages in which founders have to think about the sales side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of how to hire and find these people, that's always a big question. But I think that ultimately, you always want to look for a cultural fit. You always want to look at kind of your internal network. Do you know people that have the core talents to be great at sales, although they might not be in sales? We always joke, we always say, nobody growing up thinking I want to be in sales when I grow up. Nobody thinks that. One of the first salespeople that we hired was an engineer at NASA and was working on the Mars rover that landed, just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we always joke, we say, sales isn't rocket science, but just in case we hired a rocket scientist, to be safe. You never know what kind of personalities and people will be great at sales. But one thing that I can tell you for sure is that most people didn't think of themselves as like, I'm going to become a salesperson eventually. So you want to look at outside kind of established sales professions and look at people that love other people, that are communicators, that are hustlers, that are a lot of times good at sports or really competitive. These kind of personality traits will translate really well into sales.
Uh-huh. And in the case of founders that don't have experience on sales, do you recommend any special support or advice?
Yeah, I think that one good thing to do, or one thing that I would advise those founders to do is to go and find advisors or fellow founders or ask the investors to connect with them with people that that maybe also didn't have a sales background but kind of learned sales and became better at it. So finding peers and finding people that can be your coaches or mentors, advisors, where every few weeks you can sit down with them and tell them about your challenges. And it needs to be people that can relate to your problems, right? It can't be that if you're an engineer, you find
Mm-hmm.
a mentor in sales, been in sales their whole life. You want to look for somebody that also had an engineering background and then turned into somebody that learned about sales so they can relate to you and can give you really relevant advice. And then besides that, buy books, um, you know, go and talk to companies that are really good at sales and see how they're selling to you and just try to learn as much as possible. Just like you have to do in everything else if you're a founder, you have
Mm-hmm.
to become an expert really quickly in areas that you don't know anything about. And it's about surrounding yourself with smart people, reading, researching as much as possible, and being okay that you're not going to be okay with the fact that you're not going to be perfect at the beginning and just learn as you go.
Mm-hmm. Steli, thank you very much for sharing your experience with your time, and it was a pleasure to chat with you.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, bye.